Thank you, Sangram. So good evening, everybody, once again, and welcome to the 12th episode of Guts, Glory, and Story with Sangram and Alok. And for those of you who are joining for the first time on the show, and I hope there are not many, Guts, Glory, and Story is a show where every week we invite industry stalwarts to get their view from the absolute top. I am Alok Sinha. I've drawn several hats of a CEO, investor, entrepreneur, and my book, Achieving Successful Business Outcomes, published by Taylor and Francis, is a strategic guide for businesses and was selected by them as one of the top 6 titles from their global list of 145,000. My illustrious co-host, and I never forget to call him illustrious because he is a serial entrepreneur, 2 companies in advertising, a movie maker whose first movie cycle was screened at the Cannes Film Festival and has made a very successful debut on Netflix. Well, in our last episode, we had on our show Christian Sarkar. I know a lot of you were there. And he prodded the corporate conscience on brand activism and their responsibility towards society. He also spoke about the rising world of ecosystems, which seems to be the future of marketing. Today, we have with us Umesh Shrikhande, the CEO of Taproot Dentsu. But before he is brought on stage by Sangram, here's a quick lay of the evening. We will have a set of questions for Umesh, which will be for the first half an hour. Post that, we will ask him a few hand-picked questions that we have received from our audience, and we have a lot of questions, and that's why we will make sure that we're able to do that. The last 15 minutes will be open to live audience for any questions they would like to ask. But for the moment, it's all eyes on our power speaker of the evening, Umesh Shrikhande, and to bring him live on air, over to my co-host, Sangram. Sangram.
Thank you, Alok. Umesh and I go not a very long way, but yeah, I think we've spent quite some time knowing each other. Me knowing him as a mentor and a guru, he's taught me a lot. We are from the same industry, and not just to me, he's been this sagely man of wisdom for so many young minds in advertising. Long stint in contract. I can comfortably say he was responsible for making contract what it was in its best days. Many other stints as well, but right now he sits at the helm of affairs. He's the CEO of one of the most creative agencies in the country, which is Taproot Dentsu, right? But what Umesh is known for more than his advertising is what a thorough gentleman he is in advertising. What the magic that he does with company cultures, especially creative cultures, and how he manages to keep the creativity alive in highly creative environments. That's what his specialty is, and we'll be speaking a lot about that later. Lots of questions for him. I just hope that the audience also learns as much as I have personally, and so many other people have. So without wasting further time, Umesh, welcome to Guts, Glory, and Story.
Thank you so much. With all the stellar speakers that have preceded me, I must say I'm compelled to give a couple of short disclaimers. One, I'm wondering whether my session is about guts and glory or largely about the story, and maybe it's about the story more than everything else, story of my experiences. And the second thing is, we live in an interconnected world where everyone seems to know everything. I'm reminded of a funny meme that went around some time back, which says, on the internet, which said, "Kripaya yahan gyan na baante, yahan sabhi gyani hai." And which is quite true, because access to information and knowledge is so easy now that I can't pretend to say too many things that you've never heard before. But hopefully what my endeavor will be is to share my perspective, for better or worse. If it ends up opening new windows of thought or imagination in your head, or gives you a different way to think about a problem, maybe we would have made some progress in the half an hour that we have. Super. So happy to be here, delighted to be here, and thank you for having me on.
Great. So let's kick off. I think I'm going to shoot the first question right away. And this whole series is been themed around COVID, right? So our humble attempt was that we are communications guys, we are strategy guys. We are not here. We are here to curate information and perspectives on how do we tackle the world better. And one of the things that really changed during COVID is the consumer landscape, right? All around us, as everyday individuals, also we experience that life has changed. We are no longer going to shops to buy products. We have just started. The last 8 months, we weren't doing that. We were not going out to restaurants to eat food. We don't even know. We've forgotten possibly what it means to sit at a restaurant and order. We've been doing Swiggy and we've been doing food ordering in. Our entertainment is restricted to Netflix and to our mobile phones. As a matter of fact, every single domain when it comes to us as consumers has changed. Even homes, for that matter, we are seeing that people are wanting slightly larger homes now because they're so used to the home office that those of them who can afford, they are planning slightly larger homes post pandemic. Very few people are even keen to go back to office, me included. I can't imagine going back to a large office full. We are looking at a hybrid system. So the question to you, Umesh, is in your observation as a keen observer of consumer behavior, what are the changes that you see in the consumer landscape? One. And two, which is a more important question, out of many of these rules that have changed, do you think some of them are going to go back? Or do you think that a lot of them are going to stay the same way? So these are the two questions.
Yeah. So I'll attempt to, like I said, give a wider perspective. To claim that I will have the answers would have to make me a magician. Uh, so I think in addition to what was being referred to as a VUCA world, we now have what is called a RUP world, right? Ruptured, uncertain, paradoxical, tangled. No one really knows anything. Who would have thought that grade 1 students are going to spend attending online classes for a whole year? Typically, companies who are loath to agreeing to even one day working from home are working from home now for the last 8 months. So, like someone put it very well, it's like having spent your lifetime studying Japanese language and the Japanese map, and then suddenly getting airdropped in South America. And you don't know the language, you don't know the lay of the land, you would have no clue, and you're still supposed to proceed. So it is a tectonic shift by any yardstick, and everyone's, I won't say is clueless, but is learning one step at a time, because I don't think there's any other solution. Now, whether the changes are going to prevail or whether what one of the advertising greats, Bernbach, said is going to prevail, time will tell us. And Bernbach's quote is quite interesting. And I personally like to believe that it may not have become obsolete already. He said that it's taken 1,000,000 years for human instincts to evolve to what they are today. And it will perhaps take another 1,000,000 years for them to undergo any significant change.
Wow.
So while it is fashionable and easy to talk about the changing consumer, maybe we should give some time to the unchanging consumer. And he was referring to fundamental human drives and passions and motivations, which don't really go out of the window so fast. So when things start returning to normal, whether people will bounce back and go with a violence back to old behaviors, whether they'll settle somewhere in the middle or it'll all be new behaviors is anybody's guess. But that the fact that the landscape has changed, and there are already new jargon, and not because of jargon, but I think it happens to explain well, from a Gen C, which is a connected generation, which was digital first, and someone who prioritized immediacy and convenience and non-linear way of buying, has now further got pushed by the pandemic and what you typically refer to as somatic markers, which means uh, emotional responses guiding your decision making. And everyone's either afraid or is panic struck or is anxious. All of that has spawned another cross generational digital first psychographic, which is being referred to as generation novel after the novel coronavirus. These are not people who are just digitally centered, but they're also emotionally very charged with anxiety, with fear. Uh, it has affected everything: their performance, their behavior, their routines, how they communicate with their loved ones, how they consume news, how they work, how they play, how they learn, how they shop, how they entertain. Even in developed markets like America, almost 75% of the people during this time seem to have tried a new website or a new app or a new platform for the first time. And 60% of those people are saying that they may keep on trying these even as times change, right? Uh, Even after physical retail is opening up, a sizable number of people are choosing to stay with online buying. Contactless engagement has become a big thing. brand consciousness is heightened even more. People are taking a closer look at who's doing what. So I think, not meaning to give a tactful answer, but I think on the one hand, marketers will have to revisit business model. They'll have to revisit products and services. They'll have to revisit customer experiences. And as far as companies are concerned, they'll have to willy-nilly go through this build, discard, modify, build, discard, modify kind of cycle, listen, learn, observe. Or, like someone very interestingly put, the ability to hold strong opinions very loosely. Do your homework, have a strong opinion, but hold it loosely because you don't know which way it will go. So that's what is the short and sweet answer to your question. That uh, I think taking it one step at a time, studying trends, modifying your product services portfolio if required, certainly modifying your business model, all of that is going to be in play, and people have already begun doing that. And time will tell which way it'll go. But I think the changes are definite, and anyone who's not choosing to change fundamentally is not going to find the path easy. That much can be said.
Would it be appropriate to kind of extend that question by another observation? And I'd be keen to have your take on it. Is that fundamental things which are fundamental to human nature will not change? For example, the need and the desire of people to get together. I don't think that's going anywhere, because even with a little dip of fear, when there were these little festive spikes, people got out in large numbers. And you step out of where I stay, and during festive seasons, everybody's wearing masks, but everybody's getting out, right? But at the same time, the pandemic has forced certain behaviors which have challenged age-old assumptions of doing things. For example, going to office every day. Okay, that was not necessarily a fundamental human instinct. That was how things evolved, right? And when people have discovered that there's a better way of doing things, okay, those are some things that I fear may not go back to the original normal.
Yeah.
So to that extent, is that observation? Do you agree with that observation?
I think, like I said, significant changes will happen. Like speaking, we were talking to our colleagues, and when things go back to normal, at least 2 days a week working from home seems to have come to stay, particularly in complicated urban geographies where traffic is a big issue. And now that we've got habituated to working from home, 2 days a week seems like a breeze and a doable thing. So that's what I think will happen.
Yeah.
That's what I think will happen.
So taking forward from where you left, Umesh, you've seen journeys of many brands over the past nearly 4 decades, and you yourself said that the pandemic is forcing everyone to change. There is no way out, either change or perish. And the pandemic is nothing but a combined, if we may call, a humanitarian, an economic, and a health crisis, a mega proportion. And I remember when I was talking to Sangram earlier, and he said very beautifully, crisis spurns innovation, right? So on one side, we have crisis, and we want change, and change is innovation. But the crisis and innovation don't go together. I mean, they play basically spun. But crisis can also cripple brands. On the other hand, drive purpose. So both are possible. How do brands talk when the chips are down? And you're seeing that, right? Yeah. The chips are down, and you're seeing. So you've got Facebook as your brand. You're doing for ITC. There are many others. You've got some very large global brands who you're supporting.
Yeah.
And how do they claim authority and loyalty under such difficult times? So, as you said, everyone is on the e-commerce. Everyone's trying to sell, and the big brands are trying to retain themselves. How do they do all this? This seems to be too many balls up in the air.
Right. So typically, good question. Typically, when this is asked, people are perhaps thinking of iconic brands with deep pockets and large budgets and who advertise and so on. And we'll come to that in a moment. But any business or any individual or any organization which seems to have a point of view and wants to engage with external stakeholders is really a brand, right? So your neighborhood kirana store, people who are delivering services from water cooler repairs to water filter repairs and air conditioning repairs and whatever, people who are choosing to manufacture, like Parle manufactured their good old value for money Parle-G biscuit and made sure it was distributed. people doing immunity products, people doing innovation work like low-cost ventilators and life-saving equipment. All of those are brands as well, and through their actions and through their deeds, they advertise. So your neighborhood kirana store, if he's risen to the occasion and has made sure that everything and anything that you need is stocked and he's willing to deliver despite these tough times, then in your head, in a limited zone, it has created a special position for that brand, and you can't run away from that. Having said that, on a more popular note, when it comes to advertising, advertising has rightly so always feeds off the socio-economic context in a country. Now, in an interconnected world where consumers expect brands to have a point of view on where the world is going, they seem to find it even more important to do it. So there were some obvious responses, good responses. And when the chips are down and when people are feeling low, statements of hope and statements of energy and statements to keep the spirit alive help. So we had Coca-Cola globally doing a commercial expressing gratitude for frontline workers, upholding hope by saying for every selfish view, there are many selfless ones. Nike, being a sporting and energy brand, spoke about no one can stop us. Honda, despite being a mobility product, advised you to stay at home. So those were nice cuts, but nothing new. Closer home, I think three examples that I found quite interesting. One was the Brook Bond tea, whose promise is Swad Apne Pan Ka. It was a simple commercial where a neighbor who's returned from treatment and the husband is saying, let's stay away from him because he's just returned, and let's not interact with him and stuff. And the wife says that we can't do this, we can't leave him alone, and goes and gives him a cup of tea. So it's a simple commercial, but so it sort of spoke about how we need to be there for each other, and it stemmed from the truth of the brand. So it rang true. With working from home, everyone was wondering what to do with our time and how to use it well. And Titan did a video, I think, which was about make the most of every moment and discover your old passions, discover new loves, do things that engage you, do things that energize you, do things that teach you, but spend time well. Which once again I think stems from the category, and which is great. Facebook's promise was more together. People can get so much more done when they harness the potential and harness the contacts that they have on the platform, because people is a great resource. You just have to reach out to see how things change. And there were ads done, how a Facebook group helped doctors find houses close to their workplaces, how people got together to teach children, how people got together to transfer funds to some migrant workers, and so on and so forth. So those were interesting trends, and pretty much covers the landscape and the kind of examples I'm speaking about. But I think it has led to an interesting thought for me, which is, for all the talk about brands must comment on the social reality or be seen to be doing something good for the society, etc., I think we should keep reminding ourselves that organizations that run business brands are not quasi NGOs. They're there to do business. And like it was said, that the first and most important social objective of a business is to make profits. Because only when you make profit, there's money on the table to take care of livelihoods and future and investments and so on and so forth. So anyone and everyone must get up and do something for society is a bit of an extreme view that I find it difficult to subscribe to. If you look at brands like HDFC Bank or L&T or Infosys, they pretty much stick to their knitting and do what they know well. They're not really telling you what to do with the world. But by doing what they do well, I think they're serving us brilliantly. And that cannot be scoffed at. If stemming from your business truth and your business reality, there is a seamless social purpose that you find yourself aligning with, that's wonderful. It's a free world. You're allowed to take on any issue, but truth be told, the bandwagon effect is inversely related to authenticity. And the questions to ask is, does your brand have the authority to comment on anything and everything that crosses your path? Do you have a history of commenting on the larger human condition or human motivation? If you don't have a history, at least do you find it easy to have a commitment for the future or is it just going to be a flavor of the season campaign for you? Those are important questions, because these sporadic flavor of the season campaigns don't build equity. People get it immediately, just as in a personal lives. If your commitment to something that sounds glorious is very flaky, then you get called out and you get found out very easily. That's the same thing that happens with brand. So do you have the authority, and are you going to be taking some actions, is the point. And eventually whatever is authentic, whatever is consistent, will prevail. So brands should be remain mindful of that. uh, I don't think intuitively customers expect anyone and everyone to get up and start sort of shedding tears over what may be happening. Doing your job well, serving consumers and living up to your promises made is not an easy journey in itself, and doing that well itself is a great idea.
So, Umesh, just one question, and you spoke
Yeah,
about a couple of brands and what the ads that came in.
right.
Recently, there was this ad which I think it was Burger King in the UK, which said, go have Domino's, have
Yeah, yeah.
a whole load of competitors. Now,
Right.
what would you call that? Would you call that a gimmick?
Yeah, that no, that's a good thing. A good corporate citizen standing up for the industry, speaking for everyone. If you have the money, the bandwidth, and the stomach for it, I think most players should do it. Stand up for your industry, say something that helps not just you, but helps everyone in your business to thrive and to prosper. Uh, in India, competitive advertising of this kind is a little rare. In a public life, the role for a sorry, thank you, jokes itself is a little suspect. I'm reminded of an old ad which Virgin had done years ago. Virgin used to have the cheapest flight going between London and Paris, and for a 10-day period, British Airways announced a promo which made it even cheaper. uh, Virgin knew that British Airways was not going to run this for too long, and soon they would come back to Virgin. But when British Airways announced the promo, Virgin released an ad which said that we've always promised to fly you at the cheapest rate from London to Paris. So for the next 10 days, we advise you to fly British Airways. Now, these make life interesting. If you apportion 5% of your budget to make a warm, heartening, emotional statement or a humorous statement or prioritize wit, I think you'll only be loved by your consumers. No one, like in our personal lives, even if you're a successful professional, no one likes you to be stiff all the time and only talking about your job, right? You once in a while show your human side, and it can only work like magic. So that is not a prevailing trend, unfortunately, in India, for all the Bollywood and for all the song and dance that goes on. But when it comes to advertising, people take it very seriously, right? There's no place for wit and humor. And there's always a deep worry time and time again when we present a humorous script. The typical pushback is, will this make us get taken very less seriously or what? And I just find it amusing because that never seems to go away. It started off when I joined the business, and it still remains as a millstone around our neck. But that's how it is. That's how it is.
So I have a connected question because I think this topic has been hovering around from the last session, and
Right.
our speaker also he had a point of view on that, and extended to that, this whole issue of brands, profits, crisis, right? And I have two observations, and feel free to disagree. Absolutely. One is the attitude towards profit in crisis, right? Number one. Number two, as brands grow larger, they start yielding substantial power. I mean, the size of some brands today in the world is more than the GDP of some nations put together, right? Uh, I'm talking of brands at that stature, and I'm reminded of this very famous Spider-Man Tobey Maguire line, which says, "With great power comes great responsibility," right? So yes, for fledgling businesses which are still fighting profit battles, still fighting territorial battles, but there are lots of big brands out there who yield large advertising budgets, who are far past that curve of profits alone, right? They yield substantial power. They have lobbies. They influence governments. Okay, isn't there a larger role? Isn't there a need for a larger role to be carved out for brands of that size who wield that kind of power? And at that kind of power, is profit alone a right metric to follow? So two questions. One is in crisis, and one is, I would say,
No, there is, there is a path which many companies, and notably we always talk about the Tatas, and they seem to have done it well, which is the path to profit itself is based on doing good by your people, doing good by your stakeholders, doing good by your employees. Now, that's not the stuff that you advertise and do PR around, right? But it's a very, very, very noble thing. It also costs the company money, right? A principle is not a principle until it costs you money, and it costs them, but they still stick to that path and they do their jobs. So it is not just a separate purpose driven work that is required. You might run your organization in a manner that is extremely human, is extremely sensitive and extremely caring, and that in itself could be your higher order purpose. Having said that, my personal view is, if a purpose stems from the truth of your category or for your business, it is easier to become consistent and commit to it. Because, like I said, if I'm in information technology and I'm doing something, for a completely unrelated cause, the cause is noble. But what is giving me the authority to do something about that particular segment, right? Whereas the business I'm in triggers many, many unmet needs which have social ramifications. And it is better for a business to find a higher order purpose there, because then it is easy in the process of doing business, you can do good. I mean, a cliched example could be a farm equipment business choosing to do something for farmer welfare, right? Educating farmers' children. Now, it is easily doable because your people are going to the rural market, they're meeting farmers, and it's easy to actually act on your beliefs. If a farm equipment company is now doing something else altogether about water, for instance, not water, that's again related, but it picks on a cause which has little to do with its business, then it just becomes impractical to find time and investments to get it done.
it's a distraction.
So if it's organically stems from your business, I think it's in the fitness of things, as opposed to it being, foisted on you, or you're doing it out of a compulsion
Yeah.
because it's a good thing to do some CSR work. That I don't subscribe to, because it doesn't add back to the brand. And you got to understand that that social cause that I'm going to subscribe to and invest in, and my core brand, unless they feed on each other, this relationship can't get symbiotic and strong. And for that to happen, once again, the purpose needs to stem from your reality, and that's better, that's stronger, and that's more enduring.
That's a wonderful answer, actually. Uh, because I think fundamentally, you're already good at doing something, which is what has made you what you are. And if you stop doing that thing, then you stop growing. And if you stop growing, then your ability to contribute in future also goes down.
Right.
Wonderfully put. So I'm going to jump to Umesh, your favorite topic, right? You're a culture man. Yeah, you are responsible for building as many brands as you're responsible for building agencies, right? And I have experienced that wisdom in our coffee conversations or in our evening walks. And I believe you've been that quality of a mentor to your teams that you've grown with. In a crisis, what are the implications for culture? How should leaders navigate, and what steps should they take to ensure that their cultures are resilient enough to survive these crises and come out of it successfully?
So this is a subject that sort of takes you back to first principles. This is, as an analogy, if I'm applying for a job which requires me to be extremely well read and erudite, then by going to the bookshop the previous evening, I'm not going to achieve much, right? So culture is like oxygen for an organization. If you're going to think about it when the chips are down, I wonder what you can do about it, or how much you can travel. It was interestingly said, culture is what you do when no one's watching.
Yeah.
Or culture is the behaviors that get fostered because of your set of beliefs. And culture is what pops its head every time in a moment of truth and reiterates what you believe in, right? Now, these are long drawn out processes that happen because someone elucidates a belief, then someone chooses to show a bias for action, and that company without exception, from the CEO to the junior most person, they all subscribe to it. They talk about it. It is lived up to. It is debated. It is referred to. That's when it gets into the bloodstream of an organization. Else, there are dime a dozen mission statement boards on the receptions of many companies, but which may not actually see fruition. Closer, closer home, I think fair to say that companies who have in the pre-COVID era worried about their culture and had done something fundamental about it, and it has resonated with their people, are most definitely coming through far better than companies which had no sign of it, right? And tangible manifestations of it would be that, if your culture is strong, and I'll come in a minute to what I mean more specifically, retaining people, empowering them, adding speed, adding quality to your work, all these are ramifications of a strong culture. In at earlier at Contract and at Taproot, thank you for sort of praising me for it, but truth be told, I think it's always a team sport. uh, there were too many people around me who were of the common belief, and they all subscribed to that same vision, and that's why I think together we could do it well. Anyone alone feeling strongly about it, nothing much happens when it comes to culture. So at Taproot, for instance, very simple sounding things are done, but they've held us in very good stead. So in a very subjective business, where value creation is very difficult and getting a price for your value is even more difficult, we decided that out of both self-respect for our people and for us and for the industry, we will not agree to play blind. If someone calls us to pitch for their business and says that I can't tell you what size of the business is, I can't tell you who you're competing with, I can't tell you this, I can't tell you that, we will humbly bow out and not participate. Right? We need to know all answers. We need to operate under full information. A second principle was complete openness. Fair to say that 95% of the people at our company, 95% of the time, know 95% of the things. There's very little which is not known. Anything and everything is good enough to be known by everyone. It is a genuinely non-political culture, which means there is no management-sponsored stress. Whatever stress may be happening because of the work and some client demand, which is in the fitness of things, and sensitivity and respect, and finally no dropping the ball. So there is uh, no one is shouting at each other and no one is pushing each other, but there is an unmistakable thing in the air of when a project is on, we don't drop a ball, we keep on moving fast with agility. Now, these simple sounding beliefs, I think, have held us in good stead. More importantly, they've created a serious sense of belonging because, like I said, no matter what level you are in organization, if you're heard out, you have the right to speak up. No one takes offense with your feedback, then that's a great place to be in. And I think cultures like these, and I'm sure there are many companies out there which are doing interesting work in this territory. All such companies who've invested in behaving like this with their people and created behaviors, I think are coming on strong during this time, because in times when you're not getting to meet each other, when you're not getting to physically put wind under each other's wings, when you're not being able to transmit energy to one another, I think these beliefs that fire everyone and their performance, I think holds everything together and becomes the sticky glue that keeps the organization intact. So it is by any yardstick a huge thing. And work from home, you rightly said, is a huge challenge on how to nurture that culture. When you can't meet each other, there are limitations to a Zoom call and a Teams call. Uh, I think you will soon find many interesting ways in which people do. I read an article saying even how you speak on the phone call has to change in these times. Don't get business-like and every time you dial a colleague, say, so what's up, what's happening, has it been delivered, has it been done, has it been sent, has the proposal gone? Let there be celebration of small wins. Let there be a human conversation. Let there be some shooting the breeze without referring to business. All of that is required. You need to get very micro about it and get under the skin of the environment that we are in and worry about what it will take to. And there are no easy answers. But it is something that most definitely need to be grappled with, because people for most businesses is the most precious asset, and anything you can do to keep them charged, keep them motivated, keep them energized is required.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right.
Brilliantly.
So just one other piece which I wanted to talk to you, and we were discussing this when we were preparing for the session. You spoke about two things, and part of it is your personal culture. You talked about the habit of active listening, but I think more importantly, uh, you said that you saw a new side of nearly everyone in your family because you spent a lot of time at home together. I mean, I think all of us did, but you did mention that you saw different facets, fantastic, really warm facets of people around you. Tell us more about that. I think that should resonate with all of us, but do
Yeah.
tell us more about it.
Yeah, a quick funny thing I remembered sometime back, there was a joke going around. It said that, yesterday the Wi-Fi at home wasn't working, and I met all my members in the family, and they're quite good people. So, that sort of thing is happening in household after household, because everyone runs a busy life, and your kids may have all the compassion and kindness and caring nature, but discovering it requires quality time, right? Discovering what they have in store and what they have to offer requires physical time. Uh, just to pull back, I think in my years of work, it's very clear now after 35 years that the school of life and experience teaches you a lot more than anything else. And like Shaw said, university education cannot do you much harm provided you start learning thereafter. So it's a bit like that. And for me, two things stood out. One, the business of marketing and advertising requires you, I mean, it's better if you have multiple interests, if you have interest in a wide range of conversations, because there are no rules and boundaries to subjects. Anything and everything is par for the course. And I realized during this time, because I got to spend time with my mother, who unfortunately passed away a few months back, but uh, I learned a lot of these multiple interests from her, whether it was about humor or music or reading or being respectful of people or being networked with people. And I realized that a lot that has held me in good stead professionally came from there. And that also led me to believe, and I'd urge all the young members from the audience who might be listening in, that your own parents is an amazing repository of wisdom and knowledge, but you need to understand that not every parent might be a natural teacher for no fault of theirs. My mother might have been a good teacher, but every parent is not a natural teacher. Sharing things may not come naturally to every parent. But if a child is aware of the fact that this actually is a great repository of knowledge, then go and actively seek that out, go and get it out, sit at their feet and learn, because that's a huge resource. And by not doing it, I've realized that we tend to miss out on a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, which makes a big difference to our lives. A second thing, a little removed from this first point, which has been a very useful uh, step in my journey. I've never been much of a multitasker and a back-to-back meeting fellow, right? I personally don't subscribe to it. I think human beings are hardwired to do one thing at a time well. Watching a movie and eating popcorn is just about the multitasking that we are capable of, but not beyond. And I've realized, and I was fortunate to get the right formative influences and also then meet and interact people with similar thinking. So every time I've seen good doctors, for instance, they spend just 10 minutes with you, but the 10 minutes, they are all there. You get their full attention. They are completely with you, and they reassure you, and you leave the room with a smile. Right now, that's very powerful, and I've seen it in many senior clients of mine, and I'd like to believe that that's what makes them super performers. I was fortunate to interact a lot with Rajiv Bajaj in his early days when he just about joined Bajaj Auto and was earning his stripes and working hard to improve his products and personally involved with designing them and all of that. A fantastic listener, fully there in a meeting. And I think the benefit that it gives you, it just quietens your mind and you do full justice to what's on hand. Just as an interesting thing, not too many people respond to emails like that. And I find that very fascinating about Rajiv Bajaj. If you write a mail to him with 3 things saying, congratulations on winning an award. I don't know if you've read this book, but I thought it might interest you and I'm hoping to see you soon. His reply classically would be, thank you for your wishes. No, I've not read that book. I'd love to read it. And yes, look forward to seeing you. Full cognizance of every point, right? Anything is worth doing, it's worth doing well. Kind of a philosophy. And I think that has held me in good stead. And long back, I decided that, any colleague drops into my room, even if for 10 minutes, my endeavor should be that he or she should not leave my room with a question mark on their face. And that's my job, which means I must give full attention to what they're saying. I must be with them and do my best to solve that problem. And it has had a couple of interesting unintended consequences also. So there are 3, 4 friends of mine who I've become friends over a period of time. And I'm in touch with them. They talk to me occasionally. I talk to them. The common link between all 4 of them is they were all people who at one time were interviewing with me and I hadn't given them a job. Right. Now that I found quite heartening because it was a lesson learned that there was something about my conversation that must have been transparent, honest with them, with no bullshit on the agenda, that while the job didn't happen, they found it worth their while to stay in touch with me. So this is it just teaches you a lot. It's not about being proud about it or anything like that, but I think it just tells you that the benefit of giving your full attention to what's on the plate and people with you, I think makes all the difference and gets you to do your best and bring out your best energy.
I
Thank
think
you.
it's very appropriately. Alok, are you going to say what I am reminded of something that happened a couple of
Go
sessions ago?
ahead. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I was just going to say that.
Alok and me were both smiling ear to ear because we had this uncanny, exactly the same thing that you said right now, given by Steven Sonsino a couple of sessions earlier, where he quoted Leo Tolstoy, and a famous quote by Leo Tolstoy, and he said, uh, "Who is the most important person? What is the right time to do things?" Uh, what was the third one, Alok?
What should be
What
your pursuit?
And what
What
should you
should
be
you
doing?
do? What
And
should
what
you
should
do?
you be
What
doing?
is the right time to do? Yeah.
And the answer was, and he said he related that to the COVID pandemic, and he said, the most important person is the person sitting right in front of you. The most important time is now. And what should you be doing? You should be giving
So,
your 100% to that moment and to the person sitting in front of you. So uh,
Lovely.
it's not without reason that they say great minds think alike.
but I would like to add one more over here, Sangram. Unfortunately, he also lost his mother during the COVID period. And he was actually lamenting and reminiscing. And in the end, he said, guys, if you have your mother close to you, just go up and hug her and say thanks to her, which is, kind of see, both of you spoke the same thing, 2 things.
Amazing.
Which is, and he's the head of leadership at London Business School. Well, both of you spoke the same thing. So
Brilliant. I think, Alok, as usual, I think wisdom coming from Umesh. We've got lovely answers to our questions, but we've had a lot of questions from the audiences as well. We may not be able to fit in all, but Umesh, we want to squeeze in as many as we can in the 15 minutes that we can. Right?
Sure.
yeah,
A lot of people are from our advertising industry. We have a question from Amit, who is keen to know the role of creative agencies. How is that going to shape post-COVID? Do you think the role of creative agencies is going to change significantly? What are the dynamics that are going to happen for creative agencies?
So I'm of course biased in favor of creative agencies because that's how I built my career. But just observing human behavior and how people process things, I don't see any reason why creative agencies should worry. Should they be learning new skills? Should they be befriending the digital era? Of course, of course. I'm not saying remain caught up in a time warp, but with all the fancy tools and gadgets and solutions, if you do not have interesting thoughts being shared, if you do not have persuasive conversations being had, the digitally savvy consumer is not a moron or a left-brained character. He is as human as he always was. And he requires interesting and engaging conversations, and they only come from creativity. So I personally don't see whether the creativity need to be retooled and rechiseled and reformatted and all of that. Of course, with changing times, you got to be smart enough to adapt to what is going on. But fundamentally, creativity should see good times and not a problem. And the advertising business, for instance, is being uh, is being not threatened, but consultants, clients having in-house agents, all kind of things get discussed. But truth be told, just as we won't be able to do what an Accenture does, I'd like to believe that Accenture also won't be able to create the kind of creative culture that our kind of companies have. So there's a place for everyone. And I don't see why that should not work.
I think there's a connected question from Kavish who's asking, and we've dealt with this in one of the earlier webinars, who says, for consumer brands, is direct to consumer the only way to go? And what's the future of direct to consumer brands?
Some of these questions beg many counter questions to get a full context and then an hour-long answer. So I don't know, but I don't think any one part of the business branch is going to just fall off. So direct to consumer, of course, has the root. Direct to consumer might get, in fact, sharper and more busy in the post-COVID era because of the online dimension, and with millions more having got comfortable with purchasing and interacting online. Direct to consumer might actually start seeing even stronger and better days, is all I can say. Other than that, the category you're in, the brand you are in, what resources you're putting will really decide the flavor of that answer in a more complete sense.
So Umesh, one question coming from Sachin, and I think this is an interesting one because it's coming from both sides, the buyers as well as sellers. What he's saying is, why do brands use fake and unpractical USP to stand out? And people believe it without validating it on one side. So the buyers get sucked into it. But it's true even for the brands coming in afresh, especially e-commerce. There's so many coming in. How do they, and if they are genuine, how do they communicate genuineness? Both sides, right? And so that is the question that he's asking.
So part of it is human frailty of not questioning things and going by what surrounds it. So if the salesman is looking respectable, if the shop is air conditioned and something else is fine, then this must be okay. That's your problem. Yeah, that's not the company's problem. The other thing is, historically, the Indian consumer is very bad at DIY. You give him a whole potha of booklets, he'll tell you, "Abhi 2 minute mein samjhao yaar, isme kya hai," and just finish it off. I'm not going to read. The typical American consumer, on the other hand, will pour over not just car brochures, will pour over car financing brochures and do all kind of analysis before he goes and buys a car. For us, a call to a friend, a quick chat with the dealer salesman, one test drive, and you're pretty much home. So that's the consumer you're dealing with. So I won't say it's a gullible consumer, but it's a consumer that has chosen not to believe in rigorous homework, and you pay a price for that. Having said that, most respectable companies and the Advertising Standards Council, the board on which I am currently, the board has done a lot of work over the years to foster self-regulation, and all big advertisers are members and they support that cause. So it is not easy for a heavily spending brand to go out and blatantly circulate half-truths or misguided communication. It's not easy. You get called out in social media driven world, you get called out even stronger. So I won't generalize it so easily and say that anyone and everyone is coming out and giving out fake news. But I feel Warren Buffett said about it that if you want to make money, don't allow an advisor to come between you and your money. So it's finally that, when you're the consumer and you're going to buy something, if you're not going to be more particular and you're not going to be sharper about investigating what you're doing, you will always run the risk of being deceived. But at a formal, official, wider level, it would be ambitious to say that anyone and everyone is, fooling you around with misguided propositions. That's not true. There are many checks and balances. There are controls, and the price to pay for fooling the consumer is quite heavy now. So that itself imposes a certain control on it, right?
I think when you are answering this question from the audience, we have two brands being called out in terms of promises that they make and the credibility of those promises. One is White Hat Junior, which has got massive funding, and that's the talk of, which is the flavor of all the conversations. And second is Upgrad, which says Sabki Tarakki. I think that question has also come earlier. If you've made observations about these brands with respect to credibility of their messaging, would you like to comment?
So I haven't studied the Upgrad situation, so I may not be able to comment on it. But White Hat Junior is getting into a more fundamental discussion. Should young children be taught coding or not?
Yeah.
Isn't it too early? So that's a slightly different debate. It's not about misguiding, because apparently the truth is that there are kids who've learned and there are kids who built apps. It is not like it's a bunch of lies. It's more a existential question saying, why are kids being told to do coding when they are not even 10 years old or 12 years old? But that's a different debate. Time will tell us whether, what prevails. But I personally don't think that they are fundamentally doing something wrong or not, because finally it's a choice that the consumer makes. If as a parent, I think that my child need not do that, I don't need to go there. On the other hand, coding is just a starting point. In a manner of speaking, it's like reading. By doing coding, whether you build an app or it just makes you a more logical person, is a matter of detail. If it fosters like a subject like mathematics, teaches you to be more numerical, to be more logical, to be more aware of cause and effect, if that's what this teaches you, then it's a useful skill. To what extent you should go deep down that hole is for every individual to decide. I mean, coming to think of it, parents who uh, send their kids for a art class followed by a riding class followed by a swimming class and by something class, who am I to comment on it? If that parent and the child is enjoying that, then God bless them. On the other
Tiger moms, they say. Tiger moms, tiger dads.
yeah, on the other hand, it's a choice they're making. It's a free world.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but maybe we can squeeze in a couple of questions more. So there are two questions very closely linked, Rishabh and Sachin. Barnik and Rishabh. Digital fatigue of decision makers and how do you balance out? But the broader one, which Rishabh has written, how can upcoming brands ensure that the audience does not get saturated in a COVID-19 digital era where there are explosion of brands? So both of them are talking about digital fatigue.
Yeah. I don't think there's any easy answer to this, but I'll try. Fundamentally, I don't think the principles that applied in the pre-digital era are any different from here. In the pre-digital era, also there used to be a conversation saying that there's just too much noise. Every average consumer is seeing thousands of messages on television and is getting completely confused and bored and fatigued and all of that, which is now being discussed in the context of the digital communication. So, like always, there'll be the brands who know where to draw the line, who are wise enough to not badger the consumer. And there'll be those brands who seem to have the money and think that by knocking you on your head every 2.5 seconds, I'm going to get business. Now, it's a belief system. And I obviously subscribe to the former, because consumers are not fools. And if you repeat something and whisper something in their ear 800 times, they're going to buy. Otherwise, they're not going to buy. That's not how they behave. So excessive media weights, excessive excitement about the new thing in town is actually a frailty rather than a wise step. I mean, whoever said that you need to flood the consumer with messages? And what is worse, many times in the digital domain, the messaging is completely left-brained and rational, as if the consumer does not any longer need to be fascinated by your brand, does not have to love your brand, does not have to enjoy your brand. All you need to know is it will be delivered, the price is this, it won't break, ye hoga, wo hoga. You're not that boring people as yet, who need only messaging like that. So I think brands are learning. These are early days. And because everything is measurable, it's got on the rebound, people thought that because you're dealing with a measurable medium, you better put in something that will get measured well. So then you sort of hitting in with all rational things because that's the one that can be measured and counted, right? But that's not true. I mean, as time goes by, I'm sure there'll be a healthy blend of communication that is emotional and rational, and then we'll find a balance. But surely the questioner is right in saying that currently that balance is missing, and therefore you're finding an overload, which is not really working for brands.
So uncannily, I was currently AdWorld, the online digital marketing summit is going on, and I was hearing Rory Sutherland, who's a senior Ogilvy person, and title of the seminar, like, it said exactly what you're saying. And my advertising is so efficient that it's no longer working.
Correct.
We're all focusing on metrics. We're all focusing on saying, okay, and he gave a beautiful example of, three restaurant guys who were given coupons to be given out, $5 coupons, and they said, go distribute outside, and we will measure your metrics in terms of how many of these coupons get redeemed. Okay, and one guy came back, and 10% of his coupons were redeemed. The second guy came back, and he said that 30% of my coupons were redeemed, and the third guy came back and said 100% of my coupons were redeemed. So they said, what's the secret? How did you manage to get 100% of your coupons redeemed? And he said, you know what? I didn't use the coupons at all. I just went and told everyone on the line that there's going to be a 10% discount for everyone. You can keep on measuring metrics, okay, but you need to pull back and ultimately recognize that human emotions and nature hasn't changed in the entire world of metrics.
I'm reminded of another funny one which showed a left shoe and said data shows that 100% of the people who bought this also bought the right one. Right.
I think there is one. There are two, I would say, from people who have just started their careers or beginning their careers. One is from this girl called Muskan, who wants to know what are the tips for a student to choose the organization. And you're going to love this one. On the basis of culture, what should a student focus on if he wants to get into, or he or she wants to get into the advertising industry? What are the good culture markers for brands that you should choose to work with?
Yeah, that's not an easy one at all, because that necessarily has to be learned by trying it out, right? Uh, I wish it was more formulaic and measurable than that. But the only thing I could advise this young lady is that ask beyond the normal questions. Take the pains of talking to a couple of people who actually work there. Ask them what a typical day in the life of that company is. Ask them questions like, in your past few months that you're working there, what gave you most happiness? Would you easily leave this job? Why would you stay back? And just kind of discover a pattern which will tell you a story. And if that works for you and how you think, because it's not true that there is only one definition of a glorious culture with all people love. That's not true. There are certain people who love a certain culture. So it's also a discovery for a junior person to first figure out what's the kind of culture that works for me. If you're one of those very, very hard driving workaholic type who likes to show results and wants to be rewarded for that result every Monday morning, then you're fine in a cutthroat culture, which I may not be okay with. So it's also a discovery process for the candidate to figure out what is it that works for her, and then worry about whether that organization is going to respond with a similar ecosystem. But the short answer is ask many questions to people who've been there and figure out. That's the only way.
So Sangram, I think we should call it a close. We're already 6+, unless you want to slip in something. But go ahead. And otherwise, why don't you quickly debrief our viewers about the Jumpstart Accelerator? Just take a couple of minutes and do that, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah,
And
I think
give our thanks to Umesh.
exceed the time. Uh, I, 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 I would have loved to slip in a little more, but I believe the conversation flowed so beautifully today that we just, it's only when I realized that, okay, I had one last question which I was tempted to squeeze in, but I noticed we've already crossed, and we need 2 minutes more of our audience time. So for anyone and everyone who's been or is in the stage of being a startup, we have good news. Guts Glory Stories collaborating with WeWork Labs, and we're creating and bringing to you a program called Jumpstart. Jumpstart is going to be an intensive 2.5 months program aimed at early stage startups who've got their proof of concepts in place and who are looking to be mentored to the journey to get funding. WeWork has elaborately put a curriculum together. There will be industry mentors. There will be panel discussions. It's going to be an intensive program with almost 2 sessions a week. We've also factored COVID in. We've also acknowledged the fact that business models would need to pivot post-COVID. And there's going to be an innovation module to only address how business models can pivot post-COVID. And you actually get a chance to present your pivoted models to potential investors under the guidance of an investment committee. And what's more, ideally, our wish is that some of those who enter the program would actually get out with investments. This is Jumpstart coming soon. Stay tuned for more sessions. We'll be announcing this very soon.
Yeah, I think it's more than hope, Sangram. It's a KRA for us that 1 in every 5 should get invested. So that's our KRA.
Oh, fantastic.
But again, Umesh, thank you very, very much for this fantastic evening today. Everyone would have loved it, and we will put up the recording very shortly. But to our viewers, thank you very much. Next Saturday we'll be off air. As you know, the country will be celebrating Diwali, and so will we. We'll be back for the last leg of the session with Prabhat Tiwari of All Your Own Room on 21st, with how tech-enabled residential real estate is storming the market, and with Akhil Gupta, former CEO of Blackstone in India and currently on the boards of both Harvard as well as of Stanford, with a topic that is very, very close to his heart, which is beyond happiness. And it is an oft needed antidote for all of us. You know, all of us are suffering from frayed nerves and fearful minds. And I think that is the cap. You know, beyond everything else, there is something which is we ourselves. So that is it from our side, from Guts Glory and Story.
I wouldn't be doing justice to Umesh, but I'm seeing the chat messages being flooded with great feedbacks about the session. I'm going to read out a few. Thanks all, a very engaging one, replete with humor and reality. Thank you for a mind-blowing session. So Umesh, as usual, what I experienced with you on all our coffee sessions and walks, I think you've cast the same magic cast over this session as well. So thank you very
much. My God, I miss seeing it. It's like running up.
Thank you so much. I think my sincere thanks to both of you, because I think a conversation is only as good as all its participants. So I think you made it come live, and your questions made me think better. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I enjoyed it, and my best wishes to everyone who's attending it.
Thank you, Umesh, again.
We'll take a long break from here. Thank you for your Saturday evenings, and we shall see you next Saturday. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Okay.